Hello, everyone, and welcome to our workshop. Today, we are diving into culture, children's mathematics, and ways of knowing. And I want to start out by fully admitting that when I first started thinking and learning about this subject, I came from an assumption that math was one area that wasn't culturally influenced. Numbers are solid and they don't change based on culture, right? Well, what I learned and what we hope to share today is how wrong that statement was and how culture truly does influence mathematics learning. So to start
Hi,
off,
and welcome. I'm Lorinda Wagner, and I'm a site supervisor for the North County Cuesta College Children's Center. And I've been with our program for about 12 years.
my name is Maddie Chevalier. I am an early care and education specialist with Quality Counts in San Luis Obispo County.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bobby Sestania. I'm a coach for early educators with CAAEYC, overseeing Head Start and Early Head Start.
In today's session, we're going to do a few things. We are going to explore our own mathematics identities and the ways that these are shaped through experiences. We are going to examine a stance on teaching and learning mathematics that embraces cultural diversity and children's mathematics. That stance is available to you in the handouts folder. And we're also going to experience math development through the lens of a first-time learner. So this is the point in the presentation where if we were in person, we would be having conversations. But let's think about these questions. Let's have a conversation. What is your mathematical identity? Lorinda, do you have a thought on this?
So when I think about my mathematical identity, math was something that in school, I wasn't like the best in the class, but I wasn't necessarily as confident in my abilities, but I could stick with it. It was a formula. Numbers were always going to be consistent, whereas like English or writing or spelling, that doesn't make sense to me. So numbers, I guess I was confident in my ability that things were going to be the same every time I go to plug in 2 + 2 is always going to be 4, right? How about you, Bobby?
Yeah, so my math identity was very similar to Lorinda's point that, I wasn't awful at math. I was okay. I, maintained a C. So I was passing. But, when it comes to those higher level maths in high school, those skills such as graphing, finding, X of Y, that was a little bit more blurry for me. I was more into real world applications of math.
And for me, for Madeline, I was thinking about my mathematic identity and how I felt pretty confident about math, but there was always that sense of a little bit of embarrassment and shame in feeling that confidence where, don't raise your hand, don't be the one to present yourself as being confident in math, even though I was the one who was typically asking the teacher questions like, well, why did we find that answer? Just because I wanted him to talk more and we didn't have to do more of the learning in that instance. Ended up learning a lot about the why behind some of the math concepts, but didn't work out the way I was planning because I ended up learning more than I planned to. So thinking about the next question then, what was a moment, Lorinda and Bobby, when you felt like an insider in mathematics and when you felt empowered?
I can go. This is Lorinda. For as far as like an insider, and this is going to sound really, really silly, but like it's a little boost of confidence every time I like go to pack the car for a trip, and I can get all the luggage in there, or at school every day, I call it refrigerator Tetris, and it is definitely a spatial relationship activity every morning when I'm trying to fit all of the lunch boxes into the refrigerator. So that's kind of my like little pat on the back, like, yes, I'm good at this kind of boost for the day. How about you, Bobby?
That's awesome, Lorinda. I love Tetris, so I like that refrigerator Tetris idea that you thought of. I actually felt like an insider growing up. My father was a mechanic, and so we would be, my brother and I helping him in the garage work on his. He had a Ford 30 Model A chop top old car that we would help him, drain the brakes and do body and fender work and work under the hood. So not really thinking about it, not really explaining the mathematics behind it, but more of the hands-on doing of mathematics was really coming natural to myself and my brother because we were just immersed and living that. So that's my experience of being an insider with math.
And then Maddie and Bobby, do you have, looking at that last question of thinking of a moment when you felt like an outsider in mathematics, where you felt like you might not have belonged?
Why don't you take that one, Maddie? You have
okay. I had one that popped into my head. One of the things that I prided myself on when I was younger was my academic development, and I was like the student who had A's, and I was expected in my family that I was going to get A's, and there was a math concept that I just really struggled with, and it was logarithms. And it stands out in my mind that for whatever reason, that concept I had a mental block about. And it took me 3 different classes of learning that subject, that part of math, until I actually understood it. But I remember feeling that shame and that fear of, I don't get this, and why don't I get this, and I get everything else surrounding it, but this is one thing that's a block. And there were people in my friends who were in a step below in the math continuum that were perfectly comfortable with this concept. And for me, it was really frustrating to not understand this thing that was coming so easily to others.
I can definitely understand that. To kind of build upon that feeling of, seeing others really get concepts that you're struggling to understand or wrap your head around yourself. I feel that way I have 2 teenage boys, one in high school and one in college, and they are taking chemistry and calculus and these subjects that I didn't take when I was in high school or in college. And so they're looking to me to really help them move forward with learning those concepts. And I'm finding myself having to go back and learn a lot of those things for the first time and watch YouTube videos and, come with some kind of confidence and help to get them to the next level. And, there's no shame in realizing that I might just have to call a tutor because this is beyond my realm of capabilities at this point. So that's my feeling of being an outsider in mathematics.
And so when we're thinking about these questions, I mean, hopefully you've thought a little bit about what your mathematic identity is. Think about how your experiences when you were an insider in mathematics, when you were an outsider in mathematics, how they came together to really shape your mathematics identity. Are you someone who feels as though, oh, I'm good at math? Are you someone that feels as though, oh, I'm not so good at math? And processing some of these questions. What identities do you think are represented in the adults and children that you work with? I asked you, what is your math identity? And as I was thinking about that and thinking about mine, a lot of thoughts and words came to mind. When you're thinking about your math identity, are there feelings related to it? Are you feeling like you're bad at math? Feeling like you're good at math? The feeling of, I don't really know who I am, but I just don't enjoy it. Are you discouraged when you think about math? Are you confident? Like, yeah, I got this in the bag. Feel like maybe you're okay at some of it. A little intimidated when we're talking about math. That was me, especially at the beginning of this math journey I was on when talking about children's mathematics. A little anxious. But then there's the ways that we show our math identity. Crochet, when you have to read the pattern that says SC10 and then DC4, and you have to know what all of those mean. And and translate what's on the page written in numbers into a project. Packing a car. How do you fit all of the suitcases in and use your spatial relationships to do that suitcase Tetris? Shopping, and you see something's on sale and it's 25% off. Are you the person where your math identity comes from being able to calculate in an instant how much that item is going to be? Can you translate and convert to the metric system? If I say that we're going a mile, how many kilometers is that? If I say I need something in inches, do you know how many centimeters? For some people, that conversion, that's part of their math identity, and that's where they have a lot of strength. Are you good at guesstimating? I think it's going to be about 10 cups of flour. I think that it's going to take us about 10 minutes to get there. It's about 3 miles away. My dad says you need to turn left in 3 miles. I am not going to be the one who knows when that is coming up. I have to watch my odometer to actually know. Are you good at making change with money? If you spend $16.67 and you give them a 20, can you make change, or do you need to do a little bit of math to figure that out? And the things that influence your math identity, your gender, your culture, your parents and their teaching, your math teachers in a formal academic setting, early educators where math is just interwoven into the curriculum and in everything we do, your peers and how their math identities then come along and influence yours, and your home language and how the way that words are said in a home language translates to how we think about math and math concepts.
And so something I want to think a little bit more about is gender and those student characteristics and teacher interactions and how gender might influence a math identity. And so there's been research, of course, into gender and teachers and education. And some of the findings have been that boys receive more interaction from teachers than girls. When teachers are in classrooms, they're going to have a little bit more of that teacher attention and that teacher interaction. Boys will receive criticism for breaking rules. Girls will receive criticism for their performance. Think about how that might impact a girl's math identity if they're noticing that the boys are getting criticism because they're flicking people with a pencil, but they aren't getting criticized for not being able to solve a math problem. The girls don't get as much criticized for talking to their friend next to them, but they are getting criticized for not getting a math problem correct. And so think about how that might influence their identity and how they then feel about math. Boys attribute failure to effort. I didn't make enough effort, that's why I failed. Girls attribute failure to ability. I'm just not good at math. I'm highlighting gender just because early care and education, there is a bent towards it being a more female-dominated field, at least in my area and in my experience, and that's what I've really seen. And so it's something that we think about when we're talking about culture and our identities. Gender's part of that, and girls then teaching young children having their identities based off of teacher interactions and how those kind of come together to grow your identity. There's going to be that impact, that lasting impact. I also wanted to think about Bronfenbrenner's ecological system when we're talking about identity formation. And you probably learned about Bronfenbrenner in school, but he's one of my favorite theorists, and he has the ecology of socialization, where you have the microsystem, which is your individual self and your immediate environment, or the child's immediate environment. So their family, their playgroup, their neighborhood, and their peer group. Thinking about how these things come together to influence math identity. Family, what are their parents' views? Are their parents, especially on homework, are they engaging children in math talk? Are they really supportive of STEM fields as career opportunities. Peer groups and how the peer group, are they more academically focused? Are they more focused on play? And how that comes together for math identities. Neighborhoods, thinking about how the community comes together. The mesosystem between, let's say, the family and the school. So is the school talking to the family and working with the family and on promoting positive math identities and looking at then how that would then affect the child? The exosystem, so that external setting where that might have an indirect impact on the development, so the parents' workplaces or the PTA group. The macro system, which is that wider cultural context, which wraps around and covers everything, and that culture that covers everything, that trickles down to create, in this case, we're talking about math identity, but identity formation in general. And then the chronosystem, which is how all of this changes over time, where you might have a math identity that's very strong when you're younger, and then something changes in your peer group or your school, or there's new early learning standards that come down, and that trickles down and influences you as an individual and your early math experiences.
So stances on teaching and early learning of early math. We first learned about this at the summer symposium in 2019. And it was part of the California Early Math Initiative, and it was hosted by the Ames Center in Fresno. And this is where where you first learned about this information. So the first stance is children's resources. Young children, no matter their age or background, bring with them a diverse culture and linguistic resources and a robust mathematic understanding of learning situations. Also, our teachers who come to teach with us, the parents that we engage with, they are also coming with that diverse background and resources when they're in our learning environments. Same as the children. We know that children's first teacher are their family members, right? And those people that are caring for them. So that all influences those children before they're coming to you.
And this begs the question, are we viewing the practice through a lens of academic mathematics? If learning is a cultural process, what are the implications of depriving practices of their social and cultural specificity? What would it look like if instead of, when we talk about math and we think of it academically, what if we were looking at practices through the lens of everyday mathematics? So in other words, when I say math, do you think of sitting in your high school algebra class? Or do you think of the measurements for your abuelita's tortilla recipe? Do you think of calculus? Or do you think about planning your road trip based on how many hours it is between bathroom stops? Is it the vertices of an isosceles triangle? Or are you counting calories in a slice of pizza to determine if you can just have one more? Will that fit in your daily allotment? And that's the difference that we're talking about when we're talking about cultural mathematics, is that learning is a cultural process, and therefore mathematic learning is also a culturally based practice. So that brings us to point number 2, which is about our mathematics identities. Mathematics identities are socially constructed in ways that privilege and marginalize groups of individuals differently. Challenging the status quo of who gets positioned as good at math is critical to disrupting inequity. We wanted to share with you a video clip from the movie Hidden Figures that came out in 2016.
Miss Coleman, why don't you solve the equation on the board?
If the product of two terms is 0, then common sense says at least one of the two terms has to be 0 to start with. So if you move all the terms over to one side, you can put the quadratics into a form that can be factored, allowing that side of the equation to equal 0. Once you've done that, it's pretty straightforward from there.
In all my years of teaching, I have never seen a mind like the one your daughter has.
Think about how powerful this one glimpse is into this young lady's life. She, on several levels, would be stereotyped and put into a category of less than in creating her mathematic identity. Her mathematic identity would be shaped by what she sees in media, by her peers, her family, and her teachers. And when we're thinking about mathematical identity, what is it? This definition holds identity as the dispositions and deeply held beliefs that students develop about their ability to participate and perform effectively in mathematical contexts and use mathematics in powerful ways across the context of their lives. Identities are shaped by your own values, beliefs, and practices, but also by the values and practices of others around you. Mathematical identity addresses issues of who participates in mathematics, whose ways of knowing are valid and valued, whose goals and outcomes are seen as important. And these things are influenced by stakeholders, people who have a goal and a vision for mathematics. So policymakers, curriculum development, standards and foundations, and then people who are doing accountability testing.
So stance number 3 is about intuitive ideas. The role of early childhood educators and care providers is to build on children's intuitive ideas about math, drawing upon the resources that children bring as productive learning supports. When thinking about this, it can occur in a powerful way across a range of informal and formal spaces in playful, intentional, and developmentally appropriate ways. Next, we're going to share a video taken by the Ames Research Center.
I'm going to drop these in here and you're going to tell me how many you hear. Remember we did that before?
Yeah.
Okay, so ready?
I was counting with that one.
Yeah, let's count them. Ready?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Good job. Okay, this time you're going to close your eyes. Ready?
Yeah.
And tell me how many you hear.
5, 6, 7, 8.
How many did you hear?
It's 3. 3.
Good job. All right, let's do it again. Ready? Close your eyes.
1, 2, 3.
How many was it?
2.
Oh. Were you right?
My turn.
Oh, you want to drop some?
Yeah.
How many are you going to drop?
A lot.
A lot?
Yeah.
Okay, what about this money?
See? And another one.
Oh, you want to drop all of them?
Yeah.
Okay, are you going to count them while you do it? Okay.
You close your eyes.
I have to close my eyes.
Yeah.
How many did you drop?
5.
Are you sure it was 5?
Yeah.
Let me see. Let's see if you really did 5. Let's see. 1,
2,
2,
3, 4, and 5.
Wow, you did do 5. Can you show me 5 on your fingers?
Yeah.
How do you make a 5 on your fingers?
So after watching that little video, this activity was very intentional, right? And it was playful. The little girl counted as the marbles were being dropped and counted past the number that had been actually dropped into the container. But when asked, she was able to recall that there was only 3, or the second time there was only 2. The adult was encouraging and engaging. And at the very end, did you notice that the adult had asked a question, but the child was done? And that is something that's really important to watch for cues with the children that you work with. So let's think about it. Where do you see these 3 elements playing a role in your work? Playful, intentional, and developmentally appropriate. Are there times throughout your day that you could increase your math language? Maybe at snack time, maybe when you're pushing a child on the swings. Are there times that you can engage with a child, maybe one-on-one, maybe in a small group, depends on who you're working with, to extend or scaffold children's knowledge around math?
Point 4 of this stance is talking about children's mathematics, where research documents the development of children's mathematical understandings in early childhood. Attending to the details of children's thinking through the lens of research-based principles supports teachers to recognize what children understand and to make instructional decisions that build from what they know and what they can do. We can notice what children are interested in and help boost their understanding. One of the easiest ways that we can do this, that I'm always in awe of Lorinda, is by using mathematical language. So we can use the names of shapes: circle, square, oval, rectangle. We can start with our simple numbers when we're talking about things. Use words that show spatial relationships, such as under, on, above, below, in front. We could talk about directional words: straight, left, right, high, low, near, far. We could talk about comparative words: more than, less than, fewer, smallest. Descriptive words: light versus heavy, empty versus full. We could talk about time: before, after, then. Talking about other math words like a pair or a group. The names of coins. Use the word vertices to describe corners of shapes. Words to describe measurements. All of these things. And we can also be aware of math milestones. We know all about milestones of development, but looking at specific math ones. So for babies aged 0 to 12 months, they begin to understand and predict the sequence of events. Running water means bath time. Start to understand basic cause and effect. Shaking a rattle means noise. Begin to understand that words describe quantities. Do you want more? Do you want more? Toddlers aged 1 to 2, they start to understand that numbers mean how many. They can use fingers to show how many years old they are. They might start reciting numbers, but they will probably skip some of them. Matching basic shapes: triangle to triangle, circle to circle. Exploring measurement by filling and emptying containers over and over and over again. They are exploring measurement by doing that. Preschoolers are starting to recognize shapes in the real world. They sort things by color, shape, size, or purpose. They can count up to at least 20 as a math milestone for 3 to 4-year-olds. They can use spatial awareness to put puzzles together. And they can start predicting cause and effect, like what will happen if they drop a toy in their tub full of water. Kindergarteners at age 5, they start to add by counting the fingers on one hand, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then start with 6 on the second hand. They can copy or draw symmetrical shapes. They can start using maps to find a hidden treasure. And they understand the meaning of words like unlikely or possible, which I love as fantastic math language. First and second graders predict what comes next in a pattern and create their own patterns. They can do basic addition and subtraction up to 20, read and create a simple bar graph. They start to recognize and know the value of coins. And third graders move from using hands-on methods to using paper and pencil to work out math problems. They do addition and subtraction with regrouping, which we also know as borrowing. They create a number sentence or equation from a word problem. And these are math milestones. So these are where we are expecting children to be at varying ages. And it's just good for us to keep in mind what to expect when we're working with math development in young children.
Stance number 5, learning is multi-module. Deep mathematical learning occurs through multiple modes of communication, whether it be spoken language, gestures, movements, tools, and written representations together play an important role in supporting mathematical development of children and especially dual language learners. Think of all the ways that we as adults communicate non-verbally, right? Like it can be a raise of an eyebrow to a co-teacher sometimes, or we might give a child a direction with our finger to point in which direction they go.
And this video clip is from The Story of One. It's a documentary. And this is an example of counting in another language.
Meet the Walpuri of Central Australia. They're people who've been minding their own business here for 30,000 years or so, until some anthropologists came along and noticed that they didn't use numbers.
People get very interested in Walpuri because in our language we don't use numbers. We have a word for one, but that's about it.
Until recently, the Walpuri have got by without using numbers. How on earth have they been able to manage?
The things that you do in your world are done differently here. Take Double J here. He never grew up with any numbers at all. Never Double J. I'm not done Martida. Kendra. Kalaminidam Koro. Pun. Begin.
Jackal Joey names his grandchildren. What he doesn't say is 4. It's just not in his vocab.
Pun.
Older generation Walpuri don't talk in terms of exact times of day, just the position of the sun. They don't even deal in distances because their land is mapped out not with numbers but with songs, which contain all the information they need. These timeless songs, deeply rooted in their culture, are a source of huge national pride.
I should be so lucky, 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 lucky in love. I should be so lucky in love. Oh yeah, I should be so lucky, lucky, lucky.
The fact is, in traditional Walpuri life, they didn't really need a number system, let alone arithmetic.
And so obviously this was fascinating to anthropologists, and there was much research done. And one of the things that I found really interesting was in tests, the children were asked to put out counters that matched the number of sounds made by banging 2 sticks together. So they had to link numbers and sounds and in actions, which meant that they couldn't rely on just sight or sound. So they had to use an abstract representation of the 5-ness of the bangs and the 5-ness of the counters. So if they banged the sticks together 5 times and the children were able to pull out 5 counters, they had that connection of the sound and the items, but they didn't have the numerical representation of 5, which I just found really interesting and fascinating. And as we're talking about math and how it develops, thinking about how language is a part of that and how the culture is a part of that and what is important in varieties of cultures throughout the world. Which brings us to point number 6, early childhood educators. Hey, that's us. Early childhood educators and care providers are professionals woot woot, with vast experience and knowledge about supporting the development of young children. As lifelong learners, they and we should be supported to try new things, to take risks, to innovate, and to reflect, as these processes are critical to long-term learning. If we are attending to the details of children's thinking through the lens of research-based principles, then we can support teachers to recognize what children understand and to make instructional decisions that build from what they know and can do. And all of this starts with you. How can we expect our youngest learners to feel supported in their mathematics identities if we aren't confident in our own? We have this knowledge about how children grow and develop, but to really take it to that next level, we start looking at our own mathematics identities, developing that confidence, and then can help to instill that love of learning and mathematics to children. So here's an example of mathematics learning taking place with infants.
Look closely. What do you see? Believe it or not, this baby is doing math. Actually, she's learning geometry, or the kind of math that involves shape, size, space, and position. Here, Berta is learning about shapes and objects as she and her parents play with the soccer ball, and her parents describe what is happening.
Oh, you want to do the orange one? Wow. Look, a blue one.
2-year-old Michaela is applying her knowledge of shapes and sizes so that she can nest these cubes. She is also learning about space and position, or what fits where. Her mother encourages this learning by letting Michaela take the lead and talking about what she is doing. Grace is learning about different shapes as she builds with her mother. Watch as she thinks through where she might place each piece to build a house. Her mother helps her learn by encouraging Grace to touch the straight edge and the point of the triangle to show her what's special about this particular shape. Carly is showing us how she uses her knowledge of shapes to figure out the shape sorter. She problem solves using trial and error to find the right opening, and experiments with turning the shape so that it matches up. Brothers Frederick and Dennis put their shape skills to work to build a tower. Even though it falls down this time, learning how to combine these shapes builds a strong foundation in early math skills.
What we saw in this video was that all of these young children had both the opportunity to learn math skills through various activities and the encouragement from the adults and others around them to persist in their explorations. We as educators must use the same lens to ensure unbiased, inclusive teaching that reaches every student with the same level of expectation. Of course, we provide individualized supports, but we must allow assumptions about a child's ability to interfere with the quality of education. We must not allow assumptions about a child's ability to interfere with the quality of education that we provide each one.
As you know, teachers are powerful socializing agents. Teachers have such an influence on children and their growth and development, and especially as we're talking about this, math development. So when we're talking about teachers, effective teachers organize the classroom for learning. We are doing everything we can to provide integrated math activities into our daily routines. We're involving students in planning activities. One of my favorite math activities that we did with a group of children was we had a little boy who was interested in blue whales. And we were talking about, we read it in a book, how big a blue whale is. And then we were doing this project where we drew out on the playground, and we had to curve it a little bit, but we drew out a chalk line that was as long as a blue whale. And then we took it to that next level, and we did a measurement of that by having children all lie on the chalk line. Found out we didn't have enough children to fully fill in the chalk line. We were not as long as a blue whale. And so then we're pulling in aides, and we're pulling in children from other classrooms, and we're pulling in as many people as we can find to really measure how long and the length of this whale. And then we had to count how many people we needed, and just all of these integrated math activities that the students really helped to plan and figure out and problem solve. Adapt learning activities to children's needs and abilities, noticing the children in your classroom, noticing what they need, where their strengths are, doing assessments, doing all of these things that I'm sure you're doing in your classroom, but just really taking it to that next step and that next level of intentional noticing, and then being able to adapt learning activities to children's needs. Ensuring success for students, giving them opportunities to build that self-esteem and that math identity and that feeling of, I can do this. I am good at math. I am good at counting. I am good at spatial awareness and spatial reasoning and geometry and patterning and classification, giving them opportunities for that success. Acting as a mentor, thinking about Vygotsky, the theorist, and the zone of proximal development, and how we as teachers can boost children and act as mentors in their math identities. And communicate high expectations for student success. We know that children have abilities, and if we come at them with the assumption of their math skills and their math activity abilities, then we aren't going to be able to truly help them grow and go to the next level and create that student success. Because teacher expectations affect academic achievement. You have those high level expectations, and students will be able to reach higher levels of learning. And there are research-based benefits of guided play. So when we're talking about play, we're talking about our role as teachers in socializing children. We have free play where there's no adult guidance. We have guided play where it's child directed, but there's adult participation. And then there's adult directed play where it's focused on the adult goals and tasks. The most language interaction happens with guided play. So if we take that time to interact with children, to let their play happen in an organic way, but then be there to really provide them with rich language opportunities and rich mathematical experiences within their play, then we have that language interaction, and we're able to take their learning to the next level.
So looking at the stance as a whole, let's take a moment and reflect on it. In what ways do your current practices and approaches support this stance? Bobby and Lorinda, do you have ways that you are utilizing aspects of this stance in your classrooms and in your work?
Myself as a classroom teacher, I try really hard to make sure that my environment is engaging and respectful to the families and the children that are in my classroom. I think also providing opportunities for teachers to engage with children, to help scaffold and facilitate play-based opportunities is really important in our program.
That's
Bobby, what about
wonderful,
you?
Lorinda. You know, I was just looking at part of the stance that was talking about, you know, using multiple modalities of communication with the family. So just like you were saying, being very welcoming and open to every child and every family of every background that is participating in your center. As far as the stance is concerned, it also states, you know, spoken language, gestures, movement, tools, and written representations together. They all play an important role. So I think that if we really sit down as an individual educator and reflect on what we're doing in our classrooms, we'll really see that even though we don't think about it daily, that we are doing these things, that we are implementing these ideas and important practices to be anti-bias and open and welcoming to the families that we're working with in our centers.
And in thinking about this stance as a whole, is there anything that you might add to it? I know, Bobby, you had some thoughts on this.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Maddie. So adding to the stance, I mean, I think, again, going back to what I said earlier, that, you know, we don't always sit down and ponder these questions about how we're supporting these things or what we would bring. But if we just take a moment and think about our individual sites that we're working with and the uniqueness of them, of the demographic of our children that we're working with, the families that are, you know, getting services from us, and the different partners in our community that we're working with also, we can really add things to enhance what we're already doing at our own individual sites. So really thinking more specifically at your great work that you're doing with your children and families already, and thinking about ways that you can add things that will really benefit them in ways, I think, is a great way to look at this question.
And then ask yourself, what challenges do you face when considering how to support the continued growth of early childhood educators and care providers in your context? I mean, we're all coming from different contexts. We all have different things that are challenges. And thinking beyond just the great challenge of a global pandemic over the last year, what are other challenges that you might face? The first thing that pops to my mind is attitudes. Those attitudes from individuals who don't feel confident in their own mathematics identities and their mathematics learning. And then that translates into not feeling as confident as maybe they could be in their work with children. Now that we've examined this whole grandmaster stance on mathematics, let's take a minute and really experience math through as much as we can, through the eyes of a first-time learner. So we are going to count in alphabet world. And as we're doing this, try not to convert to number world. But I'm going to give you some problems to solve with using alphabet math, and your job is to try and come up with the answers. Are you ready? I hope so. As we're doing this, remember A plus B equals C. Ready? Here we go. First problem. So B plus B. Try not to convert back to numbers to solve the equation. Take a moment and think about it. B plus B equals D.
Okay, your next problem is C plus B equals E.
E plus C. equals H.
So D plus D would equal H.
And the last one, without converting these to numbers, if we keep them as alphabets, G plus F equals M. So we did those quick and easy, but take a moment to reflect about this. I say easy, we did them quick, doesn't mean easy, but take a moment to reflect, what feelings did you have as you explored alphabet math? I can share from my experience, the first time that I was introduced to this activity, I really struggled to not convert A is 1, B is 2, C is 3 when I was going through these. And I really struggled to not do that conversion, and really, I was trying to live in the alphabet world, and I was a little frustrated because it wasn't just coming to me as quick as the equations had been 1 plus 2 equals or 3 plus 4 equals.
And I had the same experience as Maddie. Is I actually was like, nope, can't, nope. I literally had to use tools in my resource to comprehend it. I had to write it out. A is 1, and I actually wrote out the alphabet and put a number underneath, so that way I could, or at least even just the alphabet itself, knowing, okay, so C is the third letter in the alphabet. So if I'm adding the first letter plus the third letter, I need to go to the fourth letter. And I was unable to feel successful in alphabet math.
And then thinking about that experience, how would that experience with alphabet counting be similar to what children might experience before they understand our number system? Because children don't have that same sense of the number 1 equals 1 object. It has a concrete representation, or 3 equals 3 items. And so when we're giving them these equations, or we're asking them these numerical questions, they might be having some of these feelings of discouragement, and I don't get this, and what is happening with these new squiggles that you are telling me are numbers? So this is a little bit about how we might experience things through the eyes of a child. And when we're working with children, we're exploring with them, and we're not always giving them the answer. For, like, we just didn't give you the answer of C plus B equals E.
So we did our activity with counting and looking at counting through the eyes of a child. This is an opportunity to think about spatial relationships through the eyes of a child. On this shape, there is a star. So take a moment and try and find the star within this set of shapes. And I'll talk for a little bit to give you ample time. When I first was presented with this activity, I was hearing people throughout the room going, oh, I see it. I got it. There it is. And I was not able to find it. I sat there and I was frustrated because I couldn't see it. I could not find this star, and I'm listening to all of the people in the room being able to find it. No problem. Some of them took a little longer than others, but for the most part, quick and easy. Have you found the star yet? Or were you like me, having that feeling of, I'm not good at this. I can't do this. What's happening? Why? Because usually if math involves numbers, I'm feeling confident, but now we're involving shapes and spatial relationships, and I'm going, where's that star? You're telling me it's right here, and I don't believe you because I can't find it. All right, ready? Ready to see this star? There it is. Right there. Been there the whole time. Well, we're going to go back so you can see it again. Do you see it now? So try to unsee it. See if you can stare at this page and not see the star now. It's difficult. Now that you found it, it's there. Once you know something, it's really hard to unknow it. And so we're talking about math identity and math learning and what it feels like to learn from a first-time learner. It's really hard to unknow what it's like to count to 20. It's difficult to unknow being able to subitize a group of objects. And so if we're thinking about this, what are some things that you might know about math that you might take for granted? Like that star, it's right there. It's been there the whole time. But if you don't know, if you haven't already learned it, then it's really hard to take that leap and take that next step. And then it's hard to unknow it once you've gotten there. And that is our session for today. We took a bit of time, we explored our own mathematics identities and the ways that these are shaped through experiences. We went through our stance on teaching and learning mathematics that embraces diversity in children's mathematic learning. And we got to take a moment and experience math development through the lens of a first-time learner. We have this whole list of references where we pulled information from, as well as the information from where we got our slide set, because we always want to make sure we cite our sources. I want to say thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. If you have any questions, if you want to talk to us further, if we don't get to have this conversation in the question and answer session, here are our emails. Please feel free to reach out. We do very much enjoy having conversations about children and mathematics and learning and how that's all wrapped up in children's culture.